Now, when we select a city from our application here, you can see we get taken to this new route and view. Now, we want to actually create a separate navigation bar up top here for this particular view. So let's go ahead and begin to implement that. Now, how we're going to do this is inside of our navigation component, we want to create another actual header here. Now, we need to implement a way to display one or the other based on a certain condition. So what we're going to actually do is, before we get into the HTML, we want to set up the ability to check and implement a way to show one or the other. So how we're going to do this is inside of our app.view, we're going to create a new function. Now this function is going to check the current route name. Now if the current route name is equal to add city, which is going to be this view right here, we want to display this navigation. Now if it's not, we're then going to be in the weather view and we want to display that navigation. So hopefully that makes sense. Now if we head to our methods here in our app.view, actually let's go ahead and create the data value that we're going to store the Boolean value of true or false. And so this data is going to be called add city active. All right. And by default, we will set this equal to null upon the initial render. Now in our methods here, let's go ahead and create this function that's going to check the current route. So we're going to call this function check route. And inside of here, we want to run a condition. We're going to say if this dot money sign route dot name is equal to add city. Now where we're getting this name from is inside of our router here. We gave this route the name of add city. Okay, so we're saying here if the route.name is equal to add city, then we want to set the add city data value up here to true. So we're going to say this dot add city active equals actually not triple, we just want equals true. Okay, so then we want to say else if this is not true, then we want to set this to false. All right, so currently this function's not going to run. What we actually want to do is set up a watcher on the actual route, and each time the route changes, which is going to be this URL up here, so every time we go to this route it'll run, and then every time we go back to this route it'll run as well. So how we can do that is we can come below our methods here, which ends right here, and we can set up our watcher. Now a watcher is going to watch for a certain condition to change, and when that condition changes, we're going to run the function that we want to run on that condition change, which in our case will be the check route function here. Okay, so we're going to say watch, and we want to watch the route. So we're going to say money sign route. Now this will go ahead and run the code inside of this, inside of here every time the route changes. So what we want to run is this dot check routes. All right, so now if we save this and we were to, well, I have to actually log it out to the console here. So let's just say if we'll actually just console, let's see, console.log, and we'll say this dot add city active. Okay, so as you can see here, if we go to a new route, you can see that it's going to equate to false and that condition ran. Now if we head back, you can see that we are on the add city component and this is going to equate to true. So our watcher is set up and it is now working. Now in addition to running this function inside of our watcher here whenever the route changes, we also want to run it when the application is first loaded. So we'll go ahead and toss this function inside of our created lifecycle hook. Okay, so now that we have all this complete, let's begin to actually build out the correct navigation for the weather view and also implement the ability to show one or the other based on the value of this data right here of add city active. So now to use this data, we need to actually bind it inside of our navigation component here. So we'll say add city active and set that equal to, not capital. All right, so now that we have this, we need to head over to our script tag here in our navigation component and accept this as a prop. So we'll say props, and then we're simply going to say add, why do I keep capitalizing the A, city active, and then we'll go ahead and toss a comma here on the end to get rid of that error. All right, so what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be using a VIF on this header to only show this if this value equates to true, and if it doesn't, we'll show the other header. So if we go ahead and create another header here, Vue will throw us an error because we're only allowed to have one root element. So what we actually need to do is create a div and then wrap all of these header elements inside of this div to get rid of that error. So we'll go ahead and open this up, and then we'll save that, and that should resolve the error. So what we want to say here is a VIF, and we want to say only show this header if the add city active data is true. So we'll say add active. Okay, so, and then if this, we want to say VIF this, and if that equates to false, then we'll say V else. Okay, so that's going to say if this is true, show this. If not, then show this header right here. So if we head over to our application here and we do a little refresh, we should see now when we navigate to our new view, we don't see that header up here any longer, but if we navigate back, we can see that we now have it here once again. All right, so for the new navigation, let's go ahead and see what this is going to look like. We want to create in the top left-hand corner, or the top or the left, we want to have a plus icon. Now when we click on this, it's going to take us back to the add city view, and then we want to have a timestamp here of the day, the month, and also the date. And then in the top, or I keep saying the top, in the right corner or right hand side, we want to do a degrees Fahrenheit to indicate what temperature units this is going to be in. So let's go ahead and begin to create this out here. All right, so inside of here, if I could get rid of this here, we're going to give this header a class of container. Okay, now inside of here, what we want to do first off is we want to get that icon. And what we're going to do for that icon is we actually need to wrap everything in a nav first. We're going to have a very similar structure as we do in the other header. So inside of here, we want to start off with a router link. Now, I don't believe we used a router link in our series here so far of building this weather app, but a router link is similar to a anchor tag, but this is how we actually get to new routes inside of Vue. You use a router link instead of an anchor tag, okay? And they work pretty similar, except they do accept a different attribute. Now we want to give this router link a class of router, and we'll say link. Now we want to actually give this a to attribute, which is where we want this router link to go to, but since we're going to be passing it an object, we're going to bind our to attribute here, and we're going to pass it an object, and the object's going to contain a name, and the name of the component we want to navigate to is going to be our add city. So I'll simply pass in the name of that component, add city. And what is the error? Oh, we need to use actual single quotes in here, otherwise it's going to throw an error. All right, now inside of this router link, we want to then display that icon. So that's going to have we're going to use Font Awesome for this, so we're going to pass an I class here. We're going to say class, and then we're going to say FAS, and then FA plus. All right, now after this router link, we want to display the timestamp here. So to save some time, and this is some simple JavaScript using the date method, I'm just going to copy this in. So we're going to be doing this in a span, and inside of this span, we're going to have three different things. We're going to have three different date methods here, which we're going to say to, we're going to convert to local string. We want the English, so ENUS, and for the first portion, we want to pass the object of weekday and the short method. Same thing next up, we're going to do the same exact thing, except we're going to want to get the month and also provide that in the shorthand. And then we want the day, which we're going to pass with a 2 digits. So that is going to be our timestamp there, or our time. And then finally, we want a third span here, and we're going to give this the value of and degree, DEG, and then we're going to give it a semicolon and then pass F. Okay, so Now if we take a look at our application here, you should see it starting to take shape here, but you can see that we're not seeing anything because we haven't actually done all the styling for this. Actually, I think we may have. Let me take a look down here. The only thing we need to actually add to our styling here is going to be the router link class we gave the icon, which you can see right now it is purple. We want to make that white. So we'll go ahead and do this, and now we shouldn't see anything here. And what we're going to actually do is we'll get to actually creating a function to actually let us know if it is the day version or night, because you can see now when I'm recording this, it is currently the night version, so we should have this dark purple or dark blue theme. So for now, what I'm going to do until we actually create that function is I'm going to manually assign this to have the class of night. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to grab that styling for the day and night, and we're just going to simply copy and paste that into our navigation here. So inside of our header here, we'll actually outside of the header here, we want to pass it the same way we did with add city, except this time we're going to add a transition to this of 500 milliseconds ease all. And then for the day version, we're going to give it a background color of RGB 59, 150, 249, which is going to be a nice light blue. And the same thing for night, transition 500 milliseconds ease all. And then we want to give it a background color of a darker blue or purple, which has a value of 20, 42, 95. Okay, so for now, what I'm going to do is on this header class here, I'm going to pass the value for night. So now if we head over to our application here, you should see we have this view right here. We have the nice blue background, we have our icon, we have the date, and we also have the degrees Fahrenheit here. So we can also click on this icon now, and it will take us back to the add city view. So currently we're adding this class of night to our header for our weather component navigation. Now we don't want to add this manually, we want to do this dynamically. Now how we're actually going to do this is we're going to create a function to look at the sunrise and sunset values for the current city we're going into, and we're going to also compare, or we're going to get our current time that we are in when we go into that view or that route, and we're going to say, hey, if the current time is between the sunrise and sunset values, then we're going to indicate that it is daytime. Now if it's outside of the sunrise and sunset hours, then it's going to be night, and then dynamically add that class accordingly to whether or not it is day or night in that current city. Okay, so how we're actually going to do this, let me just refresh it here. What we're going to be doing is you can see that we have access to the sunrise and sunset values here inside of our current weather object for each one of our cities. So that's how we're going to be indicating, or how we're going to be getting the sunrise and sunset time for each one of our cities is inside of the current weather object, and then we have another one called SYS, and then we have this value right here. So to start off with, we're actually going to head over to our weather component here, and we're going to create a new function. Now I also went ahead and added this new data value of current time. Okay, so what we want to do is for the new function, we're going to give it a name of get current time. All right, now inside of here, what we want to first do is get a reference to the current time that the user is in that is using this application. So how we're going to do that is we're going to create a new variable here called date object, and we're going to set this equal to new, and we're going to say date. All right, and then what we want to do is you want to say this dot current time equals the date object we just created here, and then we want to pass it the get hours. All right, not house, hours, CHOUR. There we go. All right, so currently we are just getting the current time for us or whoever is using this application. Now what we want to do is get the the sunrise and sunset values for whatever city we are currently in inside of our weather component here. So how we're going to do that is we're going to create a variable called sunrise, and we're going to set this equal to a new date. And inside of this date, we're going to pass this dot current weather dot sys, and then we're going to say sunrise. Now what we also want to do is times this by 1000, and then we want to also say get hours. Okay, so we also want to duplicate this because we want to get the same exact thing for the sunset, except we're going to pass this the value of sunset for our variable name, and then we want to come over here and say sunset, and that should do it for all the variables we need to make this function. Now what we want to do is we want to pass it a if condition here to see if the current time is between the sunrise and sunset values. Now if that equates to true, we'll go ahead and do an emit, or we're going to create a custom event that we're going to listen to here on our app.view, and when we hear that event, we're going to run a function to set a new data variable or a new data value to true, and the same thing goes for night. So if this equates to false, then we're going to create a custom event, and we're going to listen to that on the app.view, and then we will run a function accordingly to set that new data value to true, and then we'll take those values and we'll associate them for in our navigation component here. Okay, I know that's a lot to take in, but let's just get going here, and I think it'll make a lot more sense when we start to actually write this out. So what we want to say in this condition is this dot current time is between the sunrise, and then we want to say and this dot current weather, or sorry, we want to say current time, not weather. So current time and then current time here. So then we want to say is between sunset. Okay, now if this equates to true, then it is daytime. So we're going to say, we're going to emit here a custom event. So we do that by saying this dot emit, and then we pass the name of the event we want to pass, which is going to be is day. Else, if this is false, we want to create the custom event of, let's see here, we're going to call this one is night. Okay, so currently that's all we're going to have to do for this function. So what we want to do, because this function is not being called, now inside of our get weather here at the very end where we go ahead and set loading to false, we want to go ahead and call this function. So we're going to say this get current time. All right, and then we'll go ahead and call it here in this callback for this get weather function. Okay, so now that we have this set up and it's being called, we need to actually do something with these emits. So let's head over to our app.view. Now what we want to do is we're going to look for these on our router. So we want to say v on, and the custom event we called it was is day. Now on this we want to run the function of daytime. Okay, and then what we want to do also is create one for the night version. So we're going to say v on is night, and then pass this the value of night time, which is also going to be a function. Now before we continue on, I want to create the data that we're going to store these values in. So we're going to say is day, we're going to set this equal to null, and then we're going to say is night, and we're also going to set this equal to null. Okay, so inside of our methods here, let's go ahead and create these functions to set our values here of is day or is night to the correct value. So if we receive a event or a custom event of is day, we want to run daytime, and then inside the daytime we're going to simply say is day and set that to the opposite, which would be true. So we'll say daytime, open this up, and we're going to say is day and set this equal to the opposite is day. Okay, then we want to do the same thing for nighttime. We will say is night and set that equal to the opposite of is night. Okay, and then we'll pass a comma there to get rid of that error. So now that we have all this set up, so what's going to happen is that we're going to load into the weather component here, or the weather view, when we click on one of our cities here, and we're going to get an error. So let's just go back here. So currently right now, when we click on this, we're going to run into this view right here. And when we do, it's going to run this .current time. Now it's going to compare the current time to the sunrise and sunset values for that current city, and then emit the event that it's supposed to based on whether or not this is true or false. So then what we want to do is actually take those values here and use them in our navigation. So we need to do some V binding here to bind this data to this component of navigation. So we'll say is day and set that equal to is day. And the same thing for is night. If I can type. Okay, so now that we have this, we need to head over to our navigation to accept these in our props. So we're going to say comma is day, and then we want to say is night. All right, so what we want to do now that we have these data we can use inside our component is we want to dynamically set a class to our class on our header to according to whether or not this is true or this is true. So how we can do that is we can bind our class attribute here. We can say :class, and then we can pass it an object. Now inside of this object, we are able to actually compare and say, hey, if this is true, then apply this class. If not, don't apply it. And the same thing for this. So the class name that we want to actually pass is going to be day or night. So we're going to say day. Actually, we have to put the, what did I miss here? Oh, we forgot the quotes around the actual brackets here. All right. And there we go. So we're going to say day, : and we only want this day class to be added to this header if is day is true. So we're going to say is day. And then we can also pass another one or another condition here by using a comma. And then we're going to say night, and we're going to only apply this class if is night is true. Okay, so now if we head over to our component here, we got rid of the class name on here. So if we head over to the Add City view and we refresh it, and we click on weather, you can see that it took some time, but the header background color loaded in. Eventually we'll add a spinner to not show anything until the actual data has been received, like we talked about in the previous section. But for now, that is all working properly. But there is one small problem we do still need to fix. So if we go back and we click on Boston, you can see that now the background color is not present. Now the reason for that is if we head over to the let's see, app.view here, or let me kind of explain what's going on. So currently we have these values set to null. Now when the app is currently running, they're setting to the opposite. So if is night was set to true on the previous entry, now it is going to be set to false, and we're not going to see anything. So now if we were to click back here and go back into warn, you'll see that it is now visible. So on every other one, it's not going to be visible. And when we come back in here now, it will be. That's because we're setting the value here to the opposite side. So what we actually need to do to resolve that is every time we exit this view, we need to somehow create a function to set these values over here to both be null. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So there is a lifecycle hook called before destroy, which is going to run when we actually leave this component, which will happen each time we click on this plus icon here. So what we're going to do is outside of the methods here, right below the create it, we're going to create a lifecycle hook of before destroy. Now inside of here, what we want to do is actually we want to emit a custom event here. Now this event's going to be called, so we'll say money sign emit, and we want to run the custom event of reset. Actually, I forgot the quotes here. Reset, and we'll do camel case, reset days. So then what we want to do is head over to our app.vue, and we want to listen for that custom event. So we're going to say v on reset days. Then we want to call the function reset days. Now what this function is going to do is actually set both of these values to false. So we're going to say reset days, and then we simply want to say this dot is day is equal to false, and then we also want to do the same thing for is night. Okay, and then we'll say is night here. So doing this will ensure that we don't run into this problem where on every other instance we go into a new city, the background color will be white and we won't actually have one. So now if we head over to our application and we refresh it, we should see now that no matter how many views we go into here, we should always receive the background color for our UI. So if I click out of here and we go back into Detroit, you can see now that we are still getting the correct color for our header navigation here.